I've just finished a report that's going up on the World Preservation Foundation website fairly soon, I think, on regenerative grazing, regenerative ranching. And you know, this is being used with tremendous success for marketing now, but it's all smoke and mirrors. It's just, if I might digress into that for a little bit.
Sure.
It's really interesting that this particular topic, regenerative ranching, regenerative grazing, regenerative growing crops has a long and beautiful history, but that's been taken over in the last decade by those in the meat industries who are seeing this as a great marketing tool. And I had the biggest advocate is a bloke called Alan Savory, who's done a TED talk. And if you look at the number of views of that TED talk on YouTube and so on, it's been viewed about 15 million times. And he has a following now of farmers who believe that they can change the world, they can draw down all the carbon from the atmosphere, and they can produce more beef, and the world will be a happy place. And they've been conned into this by this Alan Savory talk. And it's a very, very interesting thing. But what's happened? I'll just go into the soil science for a little bit. Soil science, soil carbon is a dark art. Even the best of soil scientists find it very hard to do good science soil carbon monitoring. And so even picking a patch of soil from one foot to the other, you're going to get different results. And so confirmation bias comes in. If you want to believe that beef is good for the planet, then you will find a study that supports that belief. But the trouble is that the work that supports those that's relied on by that industry, it's not peer reviewed. It's rather sneaky, actually. They use three things. I call it the Bluffers Guide to Soil Carbon, and it's really beautiful. Take the White Oaks farm, for example. You know, there's an example of a farm. They have cattle grazing. They have these movable chicken pens that fertilize the soil, etc. And they have beautiful long grass, and they claim that this is regenerative farming. Well, yes, they measured the content of carbon in their soil, and they showed that it's increasing. But this is the sneaky trick. What number one, the first Bluffers task, and that is that they import nutrients. So what they do is they import grain to feed the chickens, and then the chickens fertilize the soil, so that the soil carbon, it doesn't come from improved grazing practice, it comes from the grain that's imported to feed the chickens. Okay, that's number one. The second one is that if you have a paddock of animals, any animals, and you do nothing to it other than take half the animals off, what's going to happen is that the grass is going to grow long, and so the roots grow more, and so you get more soil carbon. That's where the soil carbon comes from, the roots and the litter from the plants. So if you reduce the stocking rate on a paddock, you will increase the soil carbon. That's the trick number two. Trick number three is that if you take any cropland, any land that's been turned over, has been cropped for some time, and you revert that back to grazing land, just let the cattle on it, then you will find the soil carbon increases, because cropland is incredibly depleted in carbon, and any sort of pastures that are permanent from one year to the next will improve soil carbon. So that's the third trick that's used. So if you read a soil study that advocates, look, there are big results we've got, they're using one of those three tricks, and usually more than one. So some of them had stocking rates that were so ultra low, it's not actually producing any food to speak of. So it's smoke and mirrors, but it's incredibly effective. And because you have this confirmation bias, the producers who want to believe that they're doing the right thing, and the consumers who want to believe that they're doing the right thing by eating beef are vindicated. So they'll believe what they want to believe, but it's only a tiny fraction. If we replenish the world's grazing soil, it will only be 1 or 2% of all the yearly emissions. So, but we're not going to do that because most of the world's grazing lands are range lands, and it's too expensive to get out there and do and put nutrients into that land. So that's the thing. It's not going to happen. It's smoke and mirrors in it, but it's great for marketing, and so that's the regenerative grazing story. So because it's so good, because it's attracted so much attention, there's documentaries, Kiss the Ground, these other ones. We've got educational institutions offering courses now. You've got local groups offering education. You've got governments that are supporting it. So it's developed a momentum of its own, despite the huge amount of science that says it's totally ineffective. And there's a lot of science that says it's ineffective. But the marketing's been so good that it will develop. So this is the one thing that we've got to fight. We've got to call them out on that marketing that the meat industry does. And one of the big things is deforestation-free beef. JBS are an expert at shuffling the cards. They declare that their supply chains are free of deforestation, but they buy from third-party producers who just cut down the forest, who graze cattle there. So, and none of it's tracked. So that's what we've got to call them out on as well. And in fact, the world's cheap beef, the hamburgers of the world, which is most of the beef, actually comes from the rangelands, comes from those low productivity areas, including the Amazon. It's actually, the soils aren't that great. And so when they deforest, you can't put a whole lot of cattle on. Or if you do, you can only have it on for 1 or 2 years, and then you have to reduce the stocking rate. Most of the world's hamburger beef, it's called industrial beef. It comes from there. So hamburgers can almost certainly be nailed with the deforestation banner. So this is one thing. Whenever you see someone eating a burger, is that deforestation free, that beef? And you know for sure that it's not. So that's definitely what we've got to call them out on these things, and educating ourselves, such as this report that's going up on. It's an 80-page report. It's pretty comprehensive. It's going up on regenerative grazing or ranching. Is the sort of thing that we need to get out there. But it's also, there's other myths as well, if I might go into those briefly. They say that it's a natural cycle, and perhaps it was once, where we had the ruminants of the world grazing on the grass and eating that grass and being used in the field to tow the plough or to work the farm. Or to provide milk for the farmers. But we have so disrupted that balance. We now have 30 times more herbivores by weight than there were ever wild herbivores. So we have loaded up our planet with 30 times more eating and defecating animals than were ever there before. So the consumption is extreme, the nitrogen pollution is extreme, the deforestation is extreme, the water pollution is extreme, the air pollution, etc. So yes, it was once a natural cycle, maybe 10,000 years ago, but and there may have been millions of bison on the plains in North America, yes, but now there's hundreds of millions of cattle So we've so pushed this over the limit that, you know, people say that grass-fed is best, that you know, feedlots or confined production of animals is horrible, and that grass-fed in an open paddock, what could be better? Well, grass-fed is actually driving the deforestation. It's driving the lack of reforestation of those areas. It's driving the nitrogen pollution and the climate change that we're seeing. So the worst food of all, in some ways, is the most natural. That's the grazed animal. That's the worst food for the planet. And if you read George Monbiot's book, he talks about that beautifully, Regenerative, where he says that if you're arguing for more grass-fed, what you're doing is you're arguing for more deforestation. And in fact, the way they do it now and there was a study done in Australia. They have this panel, ongoing, multi-decade panel of farms, and they have this new panel, decades old, of regenerative grazing farms. And what they did is they compared the profitability. This is a government study, and they found that the regenerative farms had half the profitability of the conventional grazing farms. And the reason for that was that they only had half the number of cattle on each block of land. So to make the grass look lush and beautiful, you see, having bare ground is a very public embarrassment for graziers. They want to see the grass looking lush, and they want to see it looking good. So regenerative means that you take half the cattle off or more, and it looks great because the cows are not eating so much, and the roots are growing more, and therefore there's more soil carbon. So if you're arguing for regeneratively grazed beef or rotational grazing, whatever you want to call it, holistic, then you're arguing for even more land to be devoted for grazing. Then that means an argument for more deforestation, etc. And there's been studies done on this as well. They looked at North America, and they found that if the same amount of beef that was being produced now, if that were to be produced with a regenerative grazing system, they would need 4 times the land as they have now to produce that. You see, most animals, if they're fed on grass, they're malnourished, and they need lot feeding to actually bring them back to good shape. So, and this occurs in local areas or large areas. You can have deficiencies of minerals, etc. But most grazing animals are malnourished. An example is in Australia, we have an area, Southern Downs, an area of very fine wool, and this wool is the choice wool around the world. It's highly prized by, for example, Japanese and Europeans. And the reason that the wool is so thin is because those animals are so malnourished. So if you have a healthy, well-nourished animal, you have good thick hair. But no, this is fine hair, and it's highly prized, and it shows that the poor sheep is suffering. But the same thing occurs with grazing animals. Beef, all the beef of the world, you look at the beef that rely totally on grass, the African beasts, and don't they look in good shape? Not. They look terrible because they're malnourished. So what do we do in the West? What we do is we have them for a certain part of their life while they wean and leave their mothers for maybe 18 months or so on grass. And then we whack them in feedlots for their last 100 days or so. And we fatten them up, we feed them up, we get the meat to the generally accepted standards for marketing. So the system that we have now is the most efficient system of producing beef, and it produces good quality beef. and it doesn't place so much pressure on the environment. But if we were to take that system and make it all grass-fed, first of all, we'd have malnourished animals, and secondly, we need 4 times as much land as we have now. So there goes the forest. So this is a ridiculous situation to say eat less but better beef. It's just not on. It's trashing the environment.
Any other things? Any other solutions outside of diet? Then,
yeah.
And if not, that's fine. We can, we've got a few other people asking who want to ask questions as well. But I just wanted to see if you had anything. I know we briefly touched on governments and whatnot, and they don't seem to be overly helpful. So is it really come down to diet, and the consumers, and then the grassroots advocacy, basically?
Yeah. Well, if you look at the bleeding edge of trashing the planet, it's the Amazon, and those guys who, well, first of all, they cut down the timber. That's a bit of cash for them to start with, and that provides them with the money to keep going. And then they burn, and then they can produce pasture. So they only do it. They only keep burning. They have to do it over multi-years. They only keep burning if there's money in it.